Welcome to the Habits and Hustle podcast, a podcast that uncovers the rituals, unspoken habits, and mindsets of extraordinary people. A podcast powered by Habit Nest. Now here's your host, Jennifer Cohen.
Today, on Habits and Hustle, we have Kathy Caprino. She wrote the book, The Most Powerful You, and I'm going to just quickly go over your bio very quickly. Kathy is a career and leadership coach, a Forbes senior contributor, a TEDx speaker, a LinkedIn influencer, and host of the podcast Finding Brave, which is often ranked in the top 100. And that's them right now. And she wrote the book, The Most Powerful You, that just recently came out a couple months ago. And we're thrilled to have you on the Habits and Hustle podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Jennifer. I so appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. I think your book is very valuable, and I've learned a lot. And I have questions about career that I think people would be curious, because since that's what you do, you specialize. You're a therapist also, correct?
I'm a trained therapist. I no longer do therapy, but I have to say that lens, the lens of how do we go deep? What are the challenges? And usually challenges in our career are deeper than, let's whip up our LinkedIn profile. Although there's deep stuff there too.
I know. Yeah, I saw that. I love that.
I do use the therapy training in the coaching work. I do, for sure.
Well, absolutely. A lot of this is like having a background in psychology and how your mind works and behavioral situations, mental, in the mind is so helpful to being probably a really good career coach, right?
It really is. And, I run a course, the Amazing Career Project, and everybody says, wow, I didn't really expect that we'd go this deep. But to me, that is what creates the breakthrough.
Absolutely.
Because if it were all rocking, we'd all be where we want to be. It's usually one of these gaps, and one of these 7 power gaps, and they often are formed years ago.
Well, that's a great segue, because we're going to talk about the 7 power gaps, which you talk all about in your book, The Most Powerful You. Can you just first define what that means? What is a power gap?
Can I give you a little context on how this emerged for me?
Absolutely.
I define it. So in doing this work for 15 years, and I, in the past 5, I would say, I really started doing it on Zoom, and it was very global. And I started to see this pattern that no matter who was coming for help, whether they were making 20,000 or 2 million, whatever socioeconomic level they were, or education level, or field, or title, they started bringing the same kinds of deep challenges over and over. I found myself saying the same things over and over. So 2 years ago, I said, wait a minute, what is happening here? And I wanted to ask and answer 2 questions. Number 1, what is missing in the lives of professional women that they are coming to coaching with me for? And number 2, what is happening in the coaching process that they are having a breakthrough and changing? And what emerged from that, Jennifer, was this: 2 things are missing: bravery and power. And so I said, okay, I need to dimensionalize this. I love that your show is about, it's wonderful to have insight, but insight doesn't change your life typically.
Absolutely.
It's action, right? So I said, okay, great, bravery and power. And let me define that. Bravery to me is the courage to look at what is not working and take accountability for changing what you can change. But you need power to do that. Power is becoming that change agent in your life, being the author of your life, and advocating for yourself and other people. And there's all sorts of reasons why. And I don't mean to paint every woman with the same brush. And I think there's men listening too, and men have written me, write a book for me, for goodness sake. I have these power gaps. But women process them differently and experience these gaps differently. And, before I share the gaps, the reason for that, and this is not to bash men, this is not about that. It's to look at the system we're in, which is a patriarchal system. We're in it societally, and we're in it in business. And when we're in a patriarchal world, we split ourselves in half. We know what the masculine, and I'm doing it with quotes, is, and we know what the feminine is. Masculine is strong, not vulnerable, not weak, assertive, gets it done, dominant. The feminine is soft, pleasing, malleable, accommodating, vulnerable, emotional, connecting. The problem with this is, and at age, the research shows that at about age 12 or 13, girls are much more on par with boys in every way. How they think of themselves, leadership, raising their hand to share their ideas. At about age 13, they go underground. They don't sign up for those leadership positions. They don't think they can be an astronaut there. They don't think they should study STEM, science, technology, engineering as much. So we're formed this way. We don't pop out of the chute like this. We're shaped. So the 7 gaps then, and I kept looking at, okay, here's woman number 400. What challenges does she have? So I started categorizing them. And here they are. And, later I did a survey on this because I thought, let me check quantitatively if what I'm seeing qualitatively is. And the survey showed, so over 1,000 women around the world have taken the survey. 98% have at least one of these gaps. And 75% have 3 or more. And when you have these gaps, you cannot thrive at the highest level in work. And you pretty much can't thrive in life either, but we're talking careers. So here they are. Number 1, not recognizing your special talents, abilities, and gifts. Number 2, communicating from fear, not strength. Number 3 is reluctance to ask for what you deserve. Number 4 is isolating from influential support. And there's so much research about how women are so different about this than men. Number 5 is acquiescing instead of saying stop to mistreatment. Number 6 is losing sight of the thrilling dream you had for your life. 20 years ago or 10 years ago. And the final gap is allowing past trauma or challenge to continue to define you. That's that.
Well, I mean, even reading them again, it's like I can relate to a few of those. I'm sure, I guess I fall into the 75%, but I think most people, and I would beg to even think that's probably even a low number because people are ashamed to even admit it.
It's really true.
Right?
Or, the one, when people say, what's the one that you think is most prevalent? When I look at the numbers, the 3 most prevalent are reluctance to ask for what you deserve. That's 77%. 76% is losing sight of your thrilling dream. 76% said they have this, right? And 71% is isolating from influential support. I see it differently when they come to me. The one that's the worst is not recognizing your special talents. But worse than that, Jennifer, so only 63% that said that, but really it's 100%. I'm sorry, it's 100%. And I can look at you on LinkedIn and see in 3 minutes what you don't know about yourself.
I love that. Let's talk about that. I saw that in your book and I thought that was so telling, right? You're saying that you can see by just looking at somebody's LinkedIn profile, it says so much about that person.
So much.
Okay, tell us what it says.
Okay, so here's what I'm looking at. And, LinkedIn is my happy place. I call it the great cocktail party in the sky. We should be on it. We should be having fun. And I have a big following there. So here's what happens. When I look, here's what I'm looking for. And everybody, this is what people are looking at. So you need to attend to this. Number 1, what's your picture look like? Are you looking like this? Are you smiling? Are you facing the world face out? Do you have a cover image which represents you at an even higher level? It's not just your picture. It's what you love. What is the headline under your name? If it's just your job, you're blowing it. Honestly, because you are so much more than just your job. And, I have a kind of formula for what should be there, and anyone can reach out if they have questions because we're going fast. But it should be your overarching what you're doing in the world. So it's functionally what you're doing, who you do it for, and what are the outcomes you care about. So if you look at mine, it's Finding Brave, host, coach, leadership trainer, speaker, dedicated to the advancement of women in business. You need to be tying that all in. Then I'm looking at your summary. Oh my goodness. So many people have, 2 sentences and they're using the most platitudinal words in the world, seasoned marketing. And listen, I've made all these mistakes. This is not, I've had all of these gaps. I
So
had a
true.
crushingly difficult corporate life, even though it was very successful on the outside. So this is not judging. I'm hoping to uplift you all and have you realize how amazing you are. But if you're using these cliched words, great communicator, responsive, I listen well, or, obviously you do all those things well. We want you to shine. Why don't women want to do this? And I'll keep going what I'm looking for in a LinkedIn profile.
It's generic. They're generic adjectives that everyone uses, basically.
Exactly. And now when you're talking about each of your jobs, I'd love a one sentence that describes in an overarching way what you did, and then bullet points about not supervised, managed, no, not the tasks, but what you've achieved that you're most proud of, the outcomes that moved the needle of that company. And if you can, it'd be great to have metrics. So if you brought in 3 clients and it's worth $20, that's different from someone who brought in 3 clients worth $5 million.
Right.
Not that either, not that the first is bad, but if you have scope and metrics, now people can go, oh, wow, look what she pulled off. Right? Now we're also looking at how engaged are you? Do you have recommendations? Do you give recommendations? Are you following people? What are your interests? What are the groups? Do you have anything featured? So there's a whole section where you can feature your website or your article or your show. So what are we looking for? That you're not just showing up to your job. You're a thought leader. You're someone who shares, when we see that you have followers, it means you're sharing something on your status. And that can be, let's say you don't feel you have anything to say yet. You can follow 100 people on LinkedIn who inspire the heck out of you and share something every day that they're sharing.
Right.
But don't just share it, offer something that shows your thought leadership. So Jennifer, you might say, loved Kathy's book, My Most Powerful You. And the one biggest takeaway for me was this. Now you're just not amplifying my voice. We're now listening to what you have to contribute. What do you think?
That. No, I love it. And I'll tell you why. Number one, I have the worst LinkedIn profile in the entire world. And it's always like and I know I have to make it better and I know I have to fix it, but I just don't. And so I'm curious,
Why don't you?
It's a great question. I just, you know what? It's funny. I'm very extroverted in some ways. I'm not a big boaster when I have to write, like, I've done this. I don't even like sending my bio out. Like, I've done this. I'm like that. I think there's something to, probably most women, who've had success, they feel maybe ashamed of because of boasting about it, because you come across arrogant or with an ego, conceited. Now, I want to know something. I want to know if women compared to men on LinkedIn, do women just generally have a worse profile than men, or is it pretty much even there?
I haven't done the systematic research to answer that, but I will tell you this. I need to highlight and support what you've said. When I say to women, and I have this career path assessment that everyone fills out. 70,000 people have downloaded it.
I love it. That's on your website though, right?
Yes,
the career assessment, right?
And if you have links, I'd be happy. It's free. But it asks, what are the jobs you've had? Every job you've ever had, what you loved, what you hated. And it asks, what are you great at? Right there, they can't answer it.
Crickets.
They either leave it blank and the reason is this: when I'm on the phone with them, and I'm telling you, Jennifer, I work with people at the UN who are epidemiologists, who are, CFOs and management consultants. They're amazing. And I say to them, are you kidding me here? Look at what you have done in the past 10 years, 15 years. You don't know what you're great at. And this is what they say. I have an idea, but I don't want to say that I'm great. And I say, why not? And listen, I hope everyone will look at my profile. And I want to tell you the difference between bragging and fact. And I even talk about it in my TEDx Talk Time to Brave Up. What women say is, I don't want to sound like I'm bragging. This is training that we got, Jennifer. We got it. We got it as a child. My mom's 96 and got COVID and recovered, although she's weak now. She is a warrior. But
Wow.
when I was when I was younger, I sang, I was in the shows, I was a competitive tennis player. And one time I was in a show, a musical, and someone came up to me and my mom in the grocery store. And they said, "Are you Kathy Caprino?" Like I was a little celebrity at 16. And I guess I got all cocky later. But mom said, "I don't like this. I don't like what you're looking like here. Tone it down. This is what we get." And I can tell you, men are not getting it. They're not. They're not told to tone it down. So what I see now, again, I haven't done that survey. It would be fun to do. But I never have to tell my male clients, you're kind of sounding a little braggery there. I don't have to tell them that, but they're very confident. They're very, there's so much research on this. This is not me making it up. For instance, do you know that the research has shown that if there's a promotion or a job listed, men will go for it if they only have 50% of the qualifications, and women will wait until they have 100%, which is a huge mistake, peeps, because you can shape the job. When you're impressive enough and exciting enough, they'll say, "All right, wait a minute, we need to have you, but we'll do this differently." Men just don't struggle with this thing about it's bad to be confident.
Well, what's the difference? So give me some key things that are different between braggery and confidence.
I have an example, if I could. Now, this might sound like I'm trying to get sales. It's not. But when people say to me, and they don't ask much anymore because there's a lot of me out there. So if you watch my stuff, you'll be like, I like her or I don't, which is one of the key reasons we should put a lot of stuff out. But if someone says, "Can you tell me how you're different from other coaches? Why should I go with you?" And I'll say, I'm going to tell you 4 things. Now, I'm about to say, the difference, in my opinion, is this is fact, not bragging.
Right.
Number 1, I had an 18-year corporate career and I rose to vice president, managed big budgets. I've lived what it is to be a high-level professional woman in a crushing environment. Number 2, after that, I became a therapist, a marriage and family therapist. So what you're going to get with me is not the superficial. You're going to get the deep dive. Number 3, I have spent 15 years focused on professional women. And while this is not fact, I believe this is true. I think I know about professional women's challenges better than almost anybody because I have lived them for years and done work to overcome them. Number 4, I'm an entrepreneur. So I'm in that arena of what it is to be of service and price things and content create. And you get slapped down a lot when you're out there. I write on Forbes, and sometimes I write about very controversial stuff that people don't like what is feminism?
Yeah, that's
whoa, that comment I basically didn't recover from for a week. So I ask you, Jennifer, honestly speaking, does that sound like bragging?
No, so you're saying you stack your deck with facts. And therefore you can't. It's very hard to take a fact that's a fact and basically break it down to
what are they going to say? No, you weren't a vice president. No, you didn't study therapy. So,
and no, you don't take a deep dive. They don't know, right? So you're stacking your deck with actual truisms.
And what I suggest everybody do is listen to this TEDx Talk Time to Brave Up, but I talk about writing the 20 facts of you. This weekend, sit with a pad of paper and brainstorm the things that you're most proud that you did. Now, here, even women will struggle. Well, I'm not sure I did it. There was a team. Okay. But did you lead it in a special way? Did you lead it differently? Did you say things differently? Did you have a strategic vision that might have been different?
Right.
You're not going to do not take credit for where it's not due, but women won't take credit when it is due.
Yeah, I agree with that. But the first power gap, still, I think, like we're saying, is probably 100% when you see them, is that they're not even able to point out their uniqueness, their special qualities, their special traits. How do people move through that? And is that a way to do it? Is that to take those moments and write down the things that you're most proud of? And then from there, you can kind of dissect or kind of keep on narrowing down what those unique qualities are?
Well, I think you're bringing up a really interesting kind of distinction. The first thing is, what are you most proud of? So, am I, and your prep form even asks that. And so that might not be the same as your special talents, abilities, and gifts. For instance, if you ask me what I'm most proud of, it's that I took a mess of a career that really, I mean, there was sexual harassment, gender discrimination, chronic illness. I was sick for 4 years. Every 3 months, I would get an infection of the trachea, zero work-life balance, toxic colleagues, narcissistic bosses. I am most proud in my life that I turned that mess around and turned it into a message, that I no longer feel so thwarted and mistreated and beleaguered and confused and lost. So that's not necessarily, I mean, there were skills involved in that, but that's what I'm most proud of.
I think that actually, so in my opinion, what that says to me is maybe your special gifts or your superpowers is that you're very resilient, you're very resourceful, you're able to have that inner strength to be able to take that mess and turn it into the message or a different message. So in a way, I mean, so, but if you're saying that's different, I appreciate that. So
what should they do?
What should they do?
Give them
tactical things.
So take the career path assessment, and it's for your own edification. Now look at what those things are that gave you the most joy in that job. So for instance, let me take an example. My last 2 years vice president job, I swear it almost killed me. When I got laid off after 9/11, I thought I didn't do anything. I'm a loser. And then after about a year of healing and realizing I didn't want to be at that job, so why was I upset that I got laid off? I said, wait a minute. I did some things here. So this is what I'm talking about. I revitalized a fading business. I helped by mediating marketing and our new clients. I helped bridge gaps so we generated more money from those clients and got new clients. So you break down what that was. Then you start pulling out what skills were involved in doing that.
Okay.
So, there were bank clients we had, and they were all about to pull out. And part of it was, in my opinion, the marketing team wasn't budging about what these clients wanted. So I'm new, and I come in and I go, wait a minute. If we could bridge this gap, people in the meeting, if we could mediate these differences. So what does that take? It takes listening. It takes empathy for both sides, which neither side had. It took dimensionalizing a wish. I wish you people wouldn't just do sweepstakes when you marketed this program, because we don't believe in sweepstakes. And here's the marketing team saying, well, they work fantastically. Are you listening? The client's not going to go with you. So what does that take? Maybe it takes dimensionalizing some new strategies that both sides could actually buy. So all of you have these amazing talents, but they're embedded in a way that you need to dimensionalize and tease out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, more or less. So basically, there is like an element of writing down things that you have achieved and that you were good, that you're you kind of achieved or done well in your past career, or is it an overall life, like what you've done well. But when people ask me that question, not now as much, but give me an example of when you were able to do this X or do that. Like when I was in job interviews, right, years ago, it would always stump me, right? Like it puts you on the spot because you don't know where to kind of go. Doesn't that happen when that in this kind of situation too? Like even in your assessment, when people get asked that question, they can get totally stuck and not be able to do that. What do they do if they can't figure that out?
I love your questions, girl. All right, here's something. Sometimes, I love this quote, Einstein, you can't solve a problem on the level of consciousness that created it. Your consciousness is blocked. So what do? You get outside help. So another thing about LinkedIn, I sound like a LinkedIn rep. Here's another thing women find, not all women, but so many found so hard. Ask for recommendations. And I want to tell you, the very first one I ever got was after I left my corporate. I was booted out of my vice president job, and I thought I was a crappy leader. Part of it was I felt I was getting kicked, so I felt like I was kicking down. I just couldn't even live with myself. Out of the blue, a young woman wrote, and it's the first one I got. I think it's 2015 or 2016. And she wrote, I wasn't in Kathy's team, but she was someone who was a role model for me about what it is to be whatever. And I remember I literally cried. I'm not kidding, because it healed a few years of really thinking I had been terrible. This is what recommendations do for you. People give you words and experiences and insights about how you impacted them that you have no idea about. And then you begin to use their words because it becomes fact to you. It's not like, okay, I'm bragging. He said I was innovative and creative, and she said I was inspiring and strategic and moved the needle in a way no one else did. So now women find this very hard, but there's specific language to use to ask for a recommendation. And I also say, don't approach everything with your hand out. Think back on the 20 people you loved and give them recommendations. And it'd be great if they did it back to you, but just that very act builds your confidence. But here's, if you really want some recommendations, I'd ask everybody to do this. Think about the 20 people in your past that loved you, that they thought so highly of you, that boss, that president, that colleague, that peer. And you reach out, and of course you don't just out of the blue 10 years later say, hey, would you give me a recommendation? You say, Fred or Jennifer, it's so wonderful to see your show and how well you're doing. I remember 5 years ago when we did this together, and you were so impactful for me. And then you say something like, I'm at a juncture now where I'm hoping to move in a little bit of a different direction, and I'm beefing up my LinkedIn profile. And it would mean so much to me if you could offer just a few words of recommendation or endorsement of the time we spent together and what you experienced in working with me. Is that so terrible? That's not hard, is it?
Absolutely not. So one thing I saw also in your book that I'm a big fan of is asking for what you want, right? And not being afraid to ask for what you want. So that's basically what you're saying to do. If you can't find it within you, what a great option or something you can do to kind of take the bull by the horns is ask the people closest to you or take people who've worked with you and in a very sincere way, ask them for what they thought. So then let's say people have a problem, they're very reluctant, because this is what I find with a lot of women. People are very reluctant to ask for what they want. And so therefore they usually just default to what's in front of them, or they acquiesce to something else. What are some strategies to kind of get over that fear where they could feel they can ask?
All right. So this is where the therapist in me comes in. When someone's in my course or we're working together and they're saying, this is just so hard for me, I always ask this question. So can I echo back what I'm hearing? Yeah. You find it really hard to ask somebody to help you, or you find it hard to advocate for yourself for what you need, right? They go, right. I say, how old is this problem? And I want to tell you that 95% of the time it's from childhood. So this is hard to talk about, but this is the truth. You are what your childhood taught you to be, unless you unlearned it. You are that person. So let me give an example. I grew up with a Greek mom, my warrior mom, and an Italian dad. Dad's in heaven. Mom was tough. Like, woo. I remember when I was little, I opened a car door into another car door and the driver got mad and ran after us. And my mother said, "I'll go home and take an aspirin." I mean, I'll never forget it. She's tough. But you can't challenge my mother. No going. And I just said it the other day, and someone who has a Greek mother goes, "Boy, do I know what you mean. Greek moms don't like it." But you couldn't challenge mom because she grew up with an idea of what children should be: quiet, respectful, demure. That's what it was. So, and there's this really great question. I wish I thought of it. Tony Robbins, in his documentary, "I Am Not Your Guru," he asks, "Who did you crave love most from when you were a child? And who did you have to be to get it?" Huh? Immediately, I knew the answer. It was obedient for mom and brilliant for dad. So this is what I just want to say. And then I'll answer a bit of another part of your question. Are your parents trying to make you do this? Are they trying to make you feel like you have to be brilliant to be loved? No. If dad were alive and he were sitting here and I asked him, "Dad, did I have to be brilliant to be loved?" Would he say yes? Of course not. But it's the message I got, because he was brilliant and he'd look at my all A's and an A- and say, "Good. What happened with the A-? Right?" And mom,
are you sure you're not Jewish? Jewish and Greeks are very, very similar.
So mom, I asked her while I was writing the book, "Mom, I need your permission. I'm gonna say I had to be obedient for you. What do you think?" Dead silence. I thought, I'm going to get it. And she said, "Yeah, I can see how you would think that." So the thing is, for instance, if you had to be obedient, if you had a narcissistic parent or emotional manipulation where there was conditional love, if you weren't beautiful, you weren't loved. If you didn't make it number one on the tennis team, you weren't loved. If you didn't get into Harvard, there wasn't love. This messes us up. And you haven't unlearned it yet. So what I ask, if you struggle so hard, no matter what people tell you to do, to ask for what you want, it's probably a childhood thing. Do you need therapy around it? It would help, or it would help to work with a coach who understands what childhood does. Now, I want to say this. It's always been hard for me to ask for what I would say as a vice president, I was easy to ask, "Can I get that promotion somehow?" That was okay. But generally it's hard. But I want to tell you, the more you do it, the easier it is. So now, for instance, if I speak somewhere and I get good feedback, I will ask the host, "Would you mind posting a recommendation as a speaker?" The first time I did it, hard, coughed up a hairball. Second time, a little less hard. Now it's what I do. So I promise you it gets easier, but I would look at what is scary to you about it. Like, even if someone says, like, let's say asking for a promotion. Here's the tip. It isn't about you. It's about why the organization is going to be better off that you're at a higher level position. One thing people do, which is a mistake: "I'm so good at my job, I deserve to be promoted." Not so. If you're so good at your job, you're probably going to stay in your job. For you to get promoted and another $20,000, it has to be good for the organization. So what you do is you build a case. Before you mention it to your boss, you build a case. First of all, competitive salary research. What is someone who has 20 years experience as a digital marketer, 10 years experience as a digital marketer, what are they making? Number two, why should I get this promotion? What is going to change? What am I going to be able to achieve and give to the organization that I don't already? Number three, who else thinks I should get this? Number four, it can't be an emotional thing. You have to leave the emotion at the door. It's really a legitimate, here's the case.
It's also, it's that you're building a case that benefits them. Right. It's not a case that benefits you. No one cares about you, right? They don't. At the end of the day, people are going to give you that promotion or anything because it will benefit them in some way. So flip the script, right? I think what happens a lot of time, and women do this, I think, a lot, that I deserve it. I work so hard. I put 80 hours in a week. But people are not sympathetic to those things. If it doesn't, like you said, it will keep your job maybe.
It'll keep you job.
Right.
Or, that's what I call perfectionistic over functioning. Maybe you didn't need to work 80 hours a week. Maybe you could have done it in 60.
Right.
And I'm a recovering one. So I know
and
what
people
that's
do
like.
Right. And women, I think people do that because they feel that's what's needed and expected from them.
Right.
That's what they do.
But I would look around. Is everyone in this ecosystem doing that? So here's a statistic I would love to share. One study showed that right out of business school, 57% of men negotiated their first salary that they ever got. 7% of women did.
Wow, that's a big difference.
And you're going to be behind. You're going to be behind men. You're going to be behind other people who can speak up for themselves. Sheryl Sandberg mentioned in her book, Lean In, she was going to take the first, financial compensation offer Zuckerberg gave her for Facebook. And her brother said, "Are you crazy? You never take the first offer." And she was like, "Really?" It's just how we're raised.
Right. Well, you're right. When I negotiate on my own behalf, I always end up with much less money, right? Because I feel like I talk myself out of the money that I even think I'm deserving. I say a number and then I feel guilty, and I'm like, well, actually, it's okay. If you can't afford that, we can, let's do it at X amount instead. And it's interesting how we tend to do that as women, right? We talk our worth down versus being a lot of times, not always, it's always an exception to the rules, but instead of being strong and assertive and being very much kind of like confident in what we ask for, right? We feel guilty, right? So
that's an interesting term.
Guilty?
I'm dying to do coaching with you. What, can I ask you just so listeners will understand?
Yeah, go ahead. Ask me whatever you want.
Guilt is, I'm a writer, I'm a communicator, I listen to words. You don't say you feel embarrassed or, unsure. You say you feel guilty.
Yes.
Does guilty mean, guilt implies you've done something wrong and that maybe something not good is going to come out of this. Do you feel guilty to ask because you think if they give me that amount of money, someone else isn't going to earn some money? Or is there some part of it that you feel it's a bad thing?
Probably. I feel, not as much anymore, but as I've kind of evolved and morphed, it become much more comfortable. But I would definitely say when I was younger, and it still happens today, don't get me wrong, but not as often, where I feel badly because I feel like, oh my God, what are they going to think if I ask for that kind of money? Right. It's just kind of like you said.
What do you think they're going to think?
Right. Well, it's ingrained. I'm like, oh, is she crazy? What is she? Why does she think she deserves it? Or more than that, I think I don't want to lose the opportunity.
That's what women are afraid of.
Right. So if I say a number that's too high, I'm talking myself out of the opportunity. Versus if I go with a lower number, I have a higher chance of actually getting it, right? So that's where I think it really becomes a thing.
I hope everyone's nodding their head. I think that is so incredibly common. Another side dimension of this is what I lived through. I write for Forbes. I'm a compensated contributor, for instance. If I ask, I would like to be considered for this. What goes through my mind that I have to tame is they're going to be mad.
Yeah, they'll be like, I'll be annoyed, and
it's going to be bad for me. And a little bit of that is what I grew up with.
But isn't it true a little bit? Like some of this actually, it is kind of true, right? Like, has this ever happened where you've asked someone, I feel like depending on your relationship with who you're asking and how you ask, what I've kind of learned is it's not so much what you say, it's kind of how you say it. So it's not exactly so much what you ask, it's how you ask it. So I've been conditioned to feel that way. So if I ask too assertively, I get a certain response. If I ask more kind of loosey, kind of easy going, I feel like the response is not as offensive, right? Because that's been my experiences. So to your point, I feel it depends on it's all relative to someone's past experience, what they've been through.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love to talk about that. So when I talk about communicating from fear, not strength, or acquiescing instead of saying stop to mistreatment, why do we do that? Because many of us have been punished when we've stood up for ourselves or said, stop harassing me. Or we live in a society where strident women are punished. This is not me being paranoid. It's fact. Let me give you an example and then give a tip, kind of what you're talking about. I interviewed the behavioral science guys, Joseph Grenny and David Maxfield, and they do a lot of research and surveys and awesome research. And they did a study where they filmed a woman actor saying a forceful thing to the people in her meeting. And she said, I don't agree with the direction of the team here. They filmed a man saying the same thing, exactly the same words. And they showed it to mixed audiences. And here's the crazy thing. The woman, her perceived value in the workplace, what she is worth, dropped precipitously. Now, his dropped a little. So apparently we don't like forceful people. We her perceived competency and her value dropped much more than his. So number one, we see this. Forceful women are called biatches. Look at what's happening. But what I say to that is, yeah, that's what's happening, but we can't sit back and be not assertive so that people won't punish us. We have to show the world what it is to be assertive and confident. But they also did this other study. Is there a statement you can make before you say a forceful thing that will mitigate the backlash? And they tried all these statements, and what they came up with was a value statement. So for instance, in that case, it would be, all right, folks, I have to share. I really value honesty and transparency. So I need to share. I'm not on board with the direction here. I think why that works is that people are very threatened. Even when you go into your boss and say, I'd like a raise and I'd like it now, they're threatened, insecure people. Humans are insecure. So if you find a way to let them hear what you're saying without perturbing their insecurity, or let's say your boss, man or woman, only has a certain budget and giving you another 10,000 or 20 is not in the budget, that's going to perturb them. And I think that, research shows women have a much stronger emotional cue reading. So if we even sense that the boss is bristling, men don't sense that as much. There's tons of research. Well, if we sense it, we're going to back off. We're going to get nervous. So I do think if you can find ways where you're not perturbing their system, like, listen, Fred, I'd love to speak with you. I really do think that, given what I've done the past year, I really deserve a promotion. That's going to get him worked up, or her.
I agree. I love what you just said, though, and I think it deserves repeating. When someone needs to be assertive or forceful, to first start it with a value, because I think that really does make a massive difference in the response. A massive difference. So again, that's kind of how you table it, right? It's how you're saying something. Absolutely. Versus, because you can really get away with saying whatever the hell you want if you table it, or your appetizer is coming from an authentic place of kindness or value, because people aren't as taken aback. And I think the other part is the threaten part. I think man or woman, people are insecure and threatened by nature when they have a job. And so that's something that you have to have kind of in the back of your head. But I guess this is what I was going to say to you, and maybe you won't like this because of what about women empowerment, and maybe I'll get backlash.
What?
But I will say something, and a lot of times, as much as women should be big proponents of other women, in my experiences, and I think if women are honest, a lot of times women aren't great to other women. That's where the most threat becomes obvious. A lot of times it's easier when there is a male-female dynamic. You know, a lot of times when women are like, have you noticed? Have anyone ever mentioned that to you in all of your years of coaching? Right?
Here's what I've been asked. You know, they call it the queen bee syndrome. You have someone higher level as a woman, and she throws other women under the bus.
Yeah.
And I've been asked 2,000 times, and have I had it? I've lived through this for sure.
Right. I'm sure.
So here's my take on it. Are we born like that? No. But listen, it's a patriarchal world. Men, so many more men, and I don't have the number off the top of my head in terms of how many CEOs are men in the Fortune 500. It's a tiny percentage who are women. So what's happened in the past, and I think things are shifting, as women become more than 50% of the workforce. But in the past, 20 years ago, you didn't see women at the top often. So when a woman got there, my experience has been she's going to hang on for dear life. And it is not everyone. I've had wonderful female bosses. I've had wonderful male bosses and flipped. But
and it doesn't have to be a CEO. It could be anybody, in middle management or anywhere where the women to women dynamic is that they want to hold on for dear life. They feel threatened by you if you're talented and really good, or whatever the reason. You're likable, and it becomes a really hard situation. I've heard that actually way more often than the alternative. I just have. I mean, I'm just telling you what I've
the alternative
seen.
that they're better.
When there's been
bosses.
Like a lot of times, I think it's very PC in a way to be like, yeah, women supporting women. I think, it's been much better maybe of late but I don't think it's 100%. I don't even think it's 75%. I think a lot of time women are competitive with other women.
So let me give you my thoughts. I think it happens a lot. And I think it's for the reasons we're saying. They've scraped hard to get where they are, and they don't feel like they want to bring other women into a potentially competitive situation. 100%. But I got to ask this because I look at gender. I look at how gender responds. Have you ever asked this question? We need to do a survey. I think that men have male bosses who do that, but they don't internalize it the way women do.
Good point.
They don't go home and agonize about it. They're like, that guy's an ass. And I swear on your podcast, what an ass. All he wants to do is hear himself talk. Well,
that's a good point. That's a good point.
I'd like to do a survey on that.
You should do one. Why don't you?
I think I will.
Because I think you should, because the women's EQ, and maybe they're more emotional by nature. So it's talked about, right? More. But you're right. I don't know about the men to men ratio. I have no idea.
I remember there was one meeting, new CFO, big meeting. There was a head of marketing, digital marketing, and me and 5 other people. She was such a narcissist. And if you know one when you see one, I think. If not, look up the symptoms. And I didn't like the way she was talking to me. I didn't like the way she was talking to anybody. And I got so perturbed. I left and I said to this